Then I open the meeting and the sitting is opened. The first item of business this afternoon is the debate on the report titled The Progress of the Assembly's Monitoring Procedure, January to December 2022, document 15682, presented by Mr. Pierre Fassino on behalf of the Monitoring Committee. In order to finish by 6 p.m., I will interrupt the list of speakers at about 5:55 p.m. to allow time for the reply and vote on the draft resolution. I call Mr. Fassino, Rapporteur. You have 7 minutes now and 3 minutes at the end to reply to the debate. The floor is yours, Mr. Fassino.
Merci, Madame la Présidente. Vous avez reçu le rapport d'activité de la commission de monitorage de suivi pour le 2022. Pendant ces années, on a monitoré 11 pays comme la procédure de monitorage. Ils sont tous pays de l'Europe centrale et orientale. 3 pays avec la procédure de post-monitorage. Aussi, ces 3 pays sont pays de l'Europe centrale et orientale. Et 6 pays à travers la procédure de suivi périodique. 3 de ces 6 pays ont déjà complété la procédure, des autres 3, il est en cours. Dans le rapport, vous avez l'analyse pays par pays, que pour des raisons de temps, je vais résumer. Il faut souligner que tout ce qui est écrit pays par pays dans le rapport a été écrit sur la base des rapports qui ont présenté nos rapporteurs. Mais si on regarde tout le rapport, on peut constater qu'il y a des sujets qui sont communs. Dans tous les pays sur lesquels on a fait la procédure de monitorage, les problèmes principaux ont regardé le respect de l'état de droit, l'indépendance de la magistrature, la liberté des médias, la lutte à la corruption, les droits des minorités et le respect des règles politiques démocratiques entre qui a la responsabilité de gouverner et les partis d'opposition. Ce sont des sujets qui, partout, dans tous les pays qu'on a monitorés, ils se sont révélés être les problèmes principaux. Il y a dans tous les pays des progrès remarquables vis-à-vis des recommandations qui ont été faites par le Conseil de l'Europe et ses structures, mais il y a encore plusieurs éléments négatifs et des lacunes, et donc il faut continuer à travailler. Surtout, nous encourageons les pays qui ont été monitorés à respecter les valeurs et les droits qui sont à la base du Conseil de l'Europe, à accomplir les avis de la Commission de Venise qui a presque pour tous les pays nous donné des avis très importants. Nous encourageons les pays qui ont été monitorés à adapter sa législation aux critères, valeurs et aux droits du Conseil de l'Europe et aux indications de la Commission de Venise. Et enfin, à respecter et appliquer les sentences que la Cour des droits humains les sentences de la Cour des droits humains. Pour 3 pays, il y a eu une procédure de post-monitoring, la Bulgarie, et on signale une situation politique très très compliquée et très faible. La Bulgarie, dans les prochaines semaines, ira à la 5e élection en 3 années, dans un cadre d'instabilité politique qui nous inquiète. Le Monténégro, c'est un pays qui est en ce moment dans une crise politique institutionnelle très grave, qui se signale pour les conflits entre le président de la République et le Parlement, et à l'intérieur du Parlement entre les forces politiques. De plus en plus, en Monténègre, on ne réussit pas à donner de la stabilité politique. Et en plus, le conflit il s'est transféré dans les derniers mois sur la formation de la Cour suprême, qui a aussi la responsabilité de veiller sur les processus électoraux. Ça signifie que si on ne va pas résoudre ce conflit sur la formation de la Cour, c'est difficile même de penser que le Monténègre peut aller à des élections parce qu'il manque le sujet qui est le sujet de la garantie. Et même la Macédoine du Nord, dans lequel il y a un conflit politique interne aigu qui affaiblit la stabilité de ce pays. Je vais aussi souligner la situation en Turquie. Si on peut considérer positif que le barrage, le niveau pour l'accès au Parlement a été réduit dans la loi électorale de 10 à 7%, mais il y a plusieurs choses qui nous rendent inquiets. L'application de la catégorie du terrorisme à tout ce qui s'oppose au gouvernement en charge, une attitude à contrôler les médias, à influencer la magistrature et à affaiblir sa indépendance, à ne pas appliquer les sentences de la CEDU, comme dans le cas Kavala, et en plus, la procédure qui a été mise en œuvre pour la dissolution du Parti démocratique du peuple, qui, comme vous savez, c'est le parti de référence de la majorité de la population kurde. Donc, nous pensons qu'il faut absolument solliciter, encourager la Turquie à respecter les règles et les critères qui sont à la base du Conseil de l'Europe. Aussi, on a fait la procédure de monitoring sur l'Ukraine, mais évidemment, la situation de guerre rend très difficile la vie politique et institutionnelle en ce pays, mais il doit nous féliciter que même dans ce cadre si compliqué, l'Ukraine a ratifié la Convention d'Istanbul. Enfin, 3 pays ont été soumis à la procédure de suivi périodique. Malte, dans laquelle aussi il se pose des questions relatives à la lutte à la corruption, le respect de l'indépendance de la magistrature et la liberté des médias. Et la Roumanie, dans laquelle aussi, même s'il y a des progrès positifs, nous signalons qu'il est nécessaire de mettre en œuvre des mesures de lutte à la corruption plus déterminées et dans le même temps qu'il faut respecter l'indépendance de la magistrature. Je vais terminer. Nous n'avons pas fait seulement le monitorage, mais pour chaque procédure de monitorage, on a travaillé pour vérifier que les recommandations soient appliquées. Et enfin, je veux souligner 3 questions. Le problème, c'est que nous, la situation politique à l'intérieur et institutionnelle à l'intérieur de plusieurs pays nous sollicite d'avoir un temps plus large pour conduire les monitorages. On a besoin d'une majeure stabilité des rapporteurs. Pendant le 2022, 11 rapporteurs ont s'est démissionné et nous, on est obligés à nommer de nouveaux rapporteurs. Ça affaiblit nos travail. Et enfin, je pense qu'il faut en tout cas remercier tous les rapporteurs qui ont travaillé à différents rapports et solliciter les groupes politiques à donner une attention prioritaire à l'activité de monitorage et donc aussi à nous aider pour rendre plus stable et plus ferme le travail de notre commission. Merci, Madame la Présidente.
Thank you, Mr. Fassino. Then you have only small 2 minutes left to give comments later on. In the debate, I first call on the speakers on behalf of political group, and the first is United Left Hisyar Osoy from Turkey. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Madam Chair, dear colleagues. Let me start by expressing my thanks to Mr. Fassino for this comprehensive report on a total of 17 member states who are under either monitoring procedure or post-monitoring dialogue and periodic monitoring. The report outlines major problems in these countries, recommends ways to address them, and concludes with suggestions to improve the monitoring capacity of the PACE. We support these recommendations, particularly those related to gender balancing and the selection of rapporteurs. Despite monitoring efforts of the PACE and other organs of this very council, however, there is clear decline in democratic standards in many member countries. The report underlines various symptoms of authoritarian rule that plague many member states. I do not want to use biological metaphors to address social and political issues, but a highly contagious and fatal disease is spreading across Council of Europe territories. And we are well familiar with the symptoms of this disease: destruction of independent judiciaries, corruption, centralization of power and destruction of parliamentary democracy, attacks on the civil society, destruction of the freedom of press, of expression and association, unfair elections, oppressing the political opposition, attacks on women, LGBTI people, immigrants, and other marginalized people. In a nutshell, almost every single value and pillar on which this council was built is under severe attack, and not from outside, like from Russia, but from inside, by many member states themselves. We should improve the monitoring capacity of the Assembly, of course, but I suspect this will do much in addressing these issues. The problem we have here is much bigger and graver. The fact is that more and more member states are persistently not fulfilling their obligations, systematically refusing to comply with the terms and conditions of membership, and depriving their own citizens of democratic rights. By not implementing court rulings, some member states, my own country, Turkey included, are setting very bad examples for others to follow. We need to urgently find ways to respond to such lack of political will and willingness among member states to comply with the terms and conditions of membership. With its institutional capacity, resources, and expertise, the CPT, the Venice Commission, GRECO, the Human Rights Commissioner, the Congress of Local and Regional Authorities, among others, this council can help to improve their democratic standards and human rights, but only if member states want it. We cannot force any member state to be a democratic one. We can only remind them that by choosing to become a member of this council, they have already made a commitment, a promise, and it is not too much to ask them to keep their promise by respecting and practicing the values and principles of this council. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Ozoy. The next speaker is Max Lux, Mr. Max Lux from Germany, representing the Socialist Group. The floor is yours.
Herzlichen Dank, Frau Präsidentin, meine Damen und Herren. Im Namen der Fraktion der Sozialisten, Demokraten und Grünen in dieser Parlamentarischen Versammlung möchte ich mich sehr deutlich mit meinem Vorredner und seiner Partei, der Oppositionspartei HDP in der Türkei, solidarisieren. Wir als Fraktion der Sozialisten, Demokraten und Grünen in dieser Parlamentarischen Versammlung sind erschrocken über dieses Verbotsverfahren gegen die HDP und halten es für unvereinbar mit dem Sinne dieses Europarates und mit dem Sinne der Europäischen Menschenrechtskonvention. Es darf nicht zu einem Verbot der HDP so kurz vor diesen Wahlen kommen. Für diesen Bericht, für den wir sehr dankbar sind, hoffen wir alle, dass er der letzte sein wird, der sich so gravierend mit den Menschenrechtsverletzungen in Staaten beschäftigen muss, auf deren Mitgliedschaft wir so stolz sind in dieser Organisation. Es sind nämlich nicht so sehr die Starken in unseren Gesellschaft, die einen starken Rechtsstaat, die eine unabhängige Justiz, die eine konsequente Gewaltenteilung brauchen, sondern es sind vielmehr die Schwachen, die das benötigen, denn sie sind diejenigen, die von autoritären Tendenzen zuerst und am schwersten gezielt getroffen werden und die von uns als Delegierte im ältesten Menschenrechtsparlament der Welt zu Recht erwarten, dass wir uns schützend vor sie stellen. Der Titel Fortschritt des Monitoring-Verfahrens der Versammlung mag in dem Lichte ganz schön abstrakt klingen, aber er ist konkret. Er ist konkret für die JournalistInnen, die aufgrund guter investigativer Arbeiten verfolgt werden. Er ist konkret für Minderheiten, die wie sexuelle Minderheiten von Politikern als abnormal bezeichnet werden. Und er ist konkret für ethnische Minderheiten, die vom Staat zu oft auch bewusst nicht geschützt werden, wenn sie auf Hass und Gewalt stoßen. Und lassen Sie mich bitte dem Berichterstatter dafür danken, dass er in dem Lichte beispielsweise auch auf die Current Affairs Debate hinweist in seinem Report, die wir in der Parlamentarischen Versammlung in der letzten Sitzungswoche geführt haben. Das zeigt, wir als Europarat sind auch immer wieder bereit, uns zu modernisieren, sind auch beispielsweise bereit, für die LGBTI-Community in allen 46 Mitgliedstaaten ein starker Anwalt zu sein. Meine Damen und Herren, wir sind nicht hier, um die Finger auf andere zu richten. Wir sind hier von einer Erkenntnis getragen: Wenn wir die Menschenrechte nicht in allen Staaten dieser Organisation verteidigen, dann werden wir sie für niemanden verteidigen, und deshalb müssen wir sie verteidigen, und dieser Bericht gibt Hoffnung, dass wir weiter hinschauen werden, und dafür danke ich sehr dem Berichterstatter.
Thank you, Mr. Lux. And the next speaker is Mr. Vladimir Bagdayan from Armenia and representing the EPP group. The floor is yours, sir.
Thank you, Madam Chair. First of all, let me express the words of gratitude to the Monitoring Committee and the reporter for the excellent work done. And thank you for identifying the common problems we face, problems concerning the judiciary, corruption, elections, which unfortunately are still the part of our life and the part of the monitoring procedure. For sure, during this period, some countries have bigger and better success in comparison with the others. Some countries still have some shortcomings, but for some of the countries, both in the monitoring and post-monitoring procedure, as well as for the countries in the periodical review, we may call this report as rather regress report than progress report. You know, I agree with previous orators who said that our organization is about promise. We give this promise to our people, we give promise to each of us, and the obligation we are undertaking should be respected and protected, because we are not vis-à-vis obligations, we are obligations before our people, before our values. And for sure, I understand perfectly well that now we are facing very serious geopolitical problems, and the serious violations of yesterday now considered as minor ones, but we shouldn't keep the blind eye on this situation. We should go ahead and have the same approach to all the violations we face. Unfortunately, we should say that some member states are still continue behavior which is rather not corresponding to the values of this organization. For example, a couple of days ago, one of the leaders of the country expressed that if they don't want to have a peace treaty on our conditions, so our borders will be there where we like. Sorry, this is not the Council of Europe rhetoric. This is not something which should be considered as the obligations in the framework of the obligations before the Council of Europe. Ladies and gentlemen, dear colleagues, at this very moment when in this cozy hemicycle we discussing the issues concerning the protection of human rights, 120,000 people who are protected under this organization, under this assembly, and under this European Convention of Human Rights, we're starving. Starving, and we are waiting for any kind of response from international community. And this is quite important, that this organization should have the same standards to all the countries, to all the corners of the Council of Europe, since all the citizens protected under the European Convention should have the same guarantees of human rights and should benefit from the values of democracy. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Vardanyan. And the next speaker is Mr. Julian Bulai from Romania, representing ALDE Group. The floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Madam President. Dear Chairperson, Mr. Fassino, dear representatives of the Secretariat, thank you for what you're doing in the Monitoring Committee and for all your dedicated work and for this report. I have only one reason for being reluctant in saying that I think this is the most important committee, and that is because we have to be appreciative for all the work being done in all the committees, but this committee is really important because it is in camera, and then you can have a real discussion and a sincere discussion without the pressure of going public. And I really appreciate this, and all the actors within our committee is appreciating this very much. That being said, I am very much thankful for the rapporteurs for their great reports last year for both Turkey, Hungary, also Georgia. That being said, there have been also great periodic review reports on several countries, including Romania. A very good report. I thank the rapporteurs for that. The monitoring committee is the committee where members of the Assembly can request opinions from the Venice Commission. And traditionally, this is a tool used, out of my experience, mostly by Central Eastern states. It is extraordinary that also in camera setting, Western members of the Council of Europe are very keen on finding out more on their inner issues by demanding an opinion from the Venice Commission. And I really, really appreciate this because this is a real true mirror where you can see yourself with where you stand now and you can improve it. And in this committee, this happens without the pressure of public exposure. That being said, one final remark in a better version of this committee would be to have a sort of relation with the Office of the Human Rights Commissioner, as we could ask opinions from the Venice Commission in order to issue statements on the legislative pieces initiated in the national parliaments or by the governments. I think it would be excellent, respecting the independence of the Human Rights Commissioner Office, also to have a type of relationship, institutional relationship between this committee and the Human Rights Commissioner Office in order to ask for pertinent opinions when there is an obvious suspicion of human rights breaches. Is this something that we could do in the coming summit of the Reykjavik? Yes, probably. There is a way to go in order to reach a point where there could be a coordination relationship between two entities, yes, but here we are, it's a good committee, it can be even perfect. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Belay. The next speaker is Mr. Asim Muladzada from Azerbaijan. Yeah, the floor is yours, representing the European Conservatives.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. I would like to express gratitude to Chairman of Monitoring Committee. Very important information, in some cases in very good details. What I would like to raise, one of the biggest problems which we're suffering in Europe now, it's in some cases lack of respect to international legal system, rule of law, territorial integrity of countries, some careful attendance, any toponymic things, because what we have now, we in Europe now in situation of war, aggression, occupation of territories of many countries. And in this situation, I believe that monitoring committee can do a lot of things on behalf of Council of Europe. Also, what we have now, it's starting monitoring of big countries, because usually new members or small countries under scrutiny. But there are a lot of information of violation of human rights, ethnic rights, cultural and religious rights in big European countries. Like an example, recently in center of Paris, 2 ladies were killed because they have a different color of skin. Attack to synagogue. 80,000 citizens of France with Jewish origin now left, and there is in our Israel, there is a village of French citizens of Jewish origin. And I think that this type of monitoring of France, trying to prevent anti-Semitism, anti-Islamism, and racism is important also for Netherlands. And because in Netherlands we had a lot of facts, burning of mosques, attack to synagogue, and we believe that monitoring procedure will open these things which are against the major European principles of human rights, democracy, and rule of law. I hope that monitoring committee will have the same scrutiny for big countries, member of European Union, where situation, especially on situation related to hatred, religious hatred, cultural hatred, we should stop it because it's really very dangerous. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mulatzada. The next speaker, and then I continue on the speakers list. I look at seat 100, but the Irakli Zhikovani from Georgia and the Socialist Group, but you are, yes, you are in another place.
Thank you, Madam Vice President. I would like to thank Mr. Fasino for compiling the work that has been done within the monitoring committee. I think the work that has been done over the year, and especially taking account that this year was the post-pandemic year, there's a lot of things that have been done, and truly this is the progress. And I will be very short to underline that it is very important that my country, the country that is under the monitoring, has a great working relationship with the institutions of the Council of Europe and the Parliamentary Assembly itself. Also, I would like to underline and thank the professionalism and the dedication of the rapporteurs, and thank them for their efforts, and of course the representatives of the Secretariat. There are many things that in my country we are still working, but the progress is obvious, and I also would like to welcome that the cooperation and the relationship that we have with the monitoring procedure has been exemplary, and in this regard Georgia will continue its work to make sure that we comply with all of the obligations that was taken by my country, and rather sooner we'll move to the next stage than later. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Zhikovani. The next speaker is from Armenia, and it's Haik Marianyan, representing EPP. The floor is yours, sir.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Dear colleagues, I can see the looks on your faces. Armenians are going to speak about Azerbaijani aggression, POWs, Nagorno-Karabakh conflict, and Azerbaijani delegation will burden you with the flow of fake information. But let me explain you why we are obliged to speak up about the humanitarian catastrophe caused by the Azerbaijani blockade of the Lachin corridor and other above-mentioned topics. Please consider my words not as a political speech, but as a food for thinking. For instance, some of us today, after the session, will visit one of the restaurants here in Strasbourg, and I'm asking you, while choosing your dinner, please keep in mind that 120,000 people in Nagorno-Karabakh have nothing to choose from but the plain pasta or buckwheat. No vegetables, no fruits, nothing. And when you, honorable colleagues, will get to your cozy and warm hotel rooms to hide from the cold wind and watch some news, please remember that 120,000 Armenians have no gas and electricity for 6 to 8 hours a day. For those of you who have children, please imagine, what would you do if someone in the world would hinder their education? If it would be so cold in the classrooms that the schools had to shut down for almost a month. And if any of you will have a headache after a long day, please, while swallowing a painkiller, remember that 120,000 Armenians in Artsakh are running out of meds. And when Mr. Saidov will tell that self-proclaimed activists are exercising their magnificent right of freedom of speech, though the sentence freedom of speech in Azerbaijan is an oxymoron, please remember that Azerbaijan is 104th in environmental performance index by Yale University. And I don't recall any mass ecological protests in Azerbaijan, though a few moments ago we witnessed an Azerbaijani representative questioning French democracy. Could you imagine that after 9th of November of 1989, after the fall of the Berlin Wall, in Europe there will be a place where families and relatives are forcefully divided? In 21st century, children are not able to meet their parents for more than 1.5 months. But make no mistakes, we can't wait for 30 years. The Lachin corridor has to be unlocked now. And as Lemkin Institute for Genocide Prevention stated a few weeks ago, the world must act immediately to prevent a second Armenian genocide. Thank you, and I call you to support the amendments presented by the Armenian delegation.
Thank you, Mr. Mayanyan. And then we continue to Mr. Zoltán Börner, Hungary, and European Conservatives. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. Dear colleagues, dear rapporteurs, Hungary is a strongly committed member state of the Council of Europe, and it supports the work carried out by the Monitoring Committee. We strongly oppose to mix Hungary's obligations under EU law and Council of Europe membership. EU-level issues are outside the competence of the Council of Europe. Due to the sui generis nature of the EU legal order, compliance with obligations under the treaties shall only be examined within the framework of EU-level mechanisms. These questions should not be converted into Council of Europe level issues. Questions related to distribution of EU funds, economic cooperation of the member states, and recovery of the EU's economy do not belong to the competence of the Council of Europe. What are the institutional guarantees that monitoring procedures will remain politically neutral? In order to make the work of the Monitoring Committee more responsive and effective, how can the monitoring procedures better take into account ongoing and planned domestic developments and reforms? All reports should be factual, objective, based on reliable sources. For example, in the last report on honoring the obligation and commitments by Hungary, there was a number of references to individual cases, and they are discussed in surprising detail. If in an administrative procedure, the authority complied with provisions of the law, if the judicial review by independent court in a fair process was ensured, then the outcome of the procedure cannot be addressed in the framework of membership obligations to the Council of Europe. We believe that issues which had been satisfactorily concluded years ago have no added value in the assessment of the situation currently prevailing in a monitored country, but rather reflect a biased attitude within the report. If the aim of the monitoring procedure is to avoid the changes in rapporteurship during the two-year periodic review, would not the extension of the duration of the monitoring procedure to 3 or more years be counterproductive? Last but not least, a number of reports refer to the same sources and to the findings of these as well. This way, through the system of circular references, one single statement formulated by an NGO or by the Venice Commission has a double or triple effect, while the opposing opinion do not have such an impact, which questions that objectivity of a report. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you, Mr. Börner. The next speaker is Mr. Archil Talakvatse from Georgia and the Socialist Group. Yes, the floor is yours.
Madam Chair, ladies and gentlemen, dear colleagues, we would like to give a high credit to the committee for the diligent work completed, and I would like to thank Mr. Fassino for the comprehensive presentation. First, we would like to appreciate strong wording in the resolution in support of Georgia's territorial integrity. The fruitful cooperation with the Council of Europe gives us further motivation to consolidate our democracy and continue work on reforms. And it is helpful that the resolution highlights the importance of the wider and constructive participation and the engagement of the political parties in the process of implementation of reforms. Despite the occupation of Georgia's territories by the Russian Federation, Georgia has proved that we are able to deliver reforms and to consolidate our democracy further, to strengthen rule of law and protect human rights in the country. The work completed by us in the recent years includes the ensured and greater guarantees for the protection of human rights through the constitutional amendments, new labor law, and successful penitentiary reform with a double-fold decrease of the prison population, new legislation on child's rights and the juvenile justice, new legislation enforced on disability rights, and new regulations on environmental protection and biodiversity. Georgia has a stronger parliament now. Georgia has more pluralistic parliament now, with stronger instruments on oversight and stronger mechanisms to hold government accountable. We enforce the laws to support greater participation of women in politics. Georgia has pluralistic and independent media in operation. The several package of reforms in judiciary implemented by us gave a clear result. We observed that applications against Georgia in the European Court of Human Rights decreased by 60%. Competitive environment in the courts restored. The balance in the decisions between the parties in dispute is also there. And this promising results ensures us that reforms for the judiciary system must continue. And finally, we are grateful that there are 12 recommendations by the European Union, which gives a clear avenue for Georgia's democratic path. This was Georgia's story in short. It is evidently better Georgia now than it was 10 years ago. And we are grateful for the excellent cooperation with Council of Europe, and we assure you that commitments will be fulfilled. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Mr. Talakvatse. I then continue with Mrs. Maria Mentseva, Ukraine EPP Group, and continue Demir after that. The floor is yours, Mrs.
Thank you, dear Madam Scout, dear President. Colleagues, this report is extremely important, even though there are not many colleagues which are remaining in the hall. And we understand that monitoring some of the member states during the international armed conflict is also challenging, even though the reporters, the delegate from Sweden, Switzerland and Iceland did make contacts with Ukrainian delegation. I can reconfirm that, even though I would like to point out that the latest contacts could have been more extended to various political parties. And I would like to inform the rapporteur and also the committee, the Extended Committee on Monitoring Procedures, that, for instance, the parts which are missing, and again, you can't fill in all the laws that Ukrainian parliament is passing, because we do around 30 laws per week, and the documents have to be prepared beforehand. So I would like to update you that one of the important items, the law on media, which was in line with all obligations, amended and voted by all the parties of Ukrainian parliament, supported by those who had who had questioned this law in close cooperation with the Council of Europe authorities. Also, the very important topic, fighting corruption. Colleagues, I would like to point out that we are the only country who has initiated and passed in the parliament the law on fighting oligarchs, those people who can influence the media, who can influence the elections, who have enormous powers in economy, and who directly impose it in the political spectrum. And indeed, we are expecting the feedback of the Venice Commission, looking forward to that. But if we are fighting corruption, we joke in Ukraine, we have to choose whether we are smart or beautiful. We can be both, of course, but then please support that in this endeavors in fighting corruption. Of course, I cannot not mention the High Commission on Ethics, which was duly involved in the Supreme in the Supreme Council of Justice. And all that was done during the missile attacks and enormous strikes of the Russian rockets on various regions of Ukraine. Of course, we have had the candidates for the High Commission on Judges, and of course we can say that those who have not met the criteria will never be appointed. That is not all on our side, but I see that I'm running out of time, and we remain at disposal for the visit that hasn't been done in person, but I would like to reconfirm and enlarge and extend our invitations. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Ms. Messentseva. Then I continue with Mr. Damien Gauthier from Switzerland and ALDE.
Merci, Madame la Présidente de séance, et merci au Président de la Commission de la vue d'ensemble qu'il a pu donner. J'interviens sur le Monténégro. Je suis co-rapporteur avec M. Tornaritis de Chypre, qui n'est pas ici. Et je dois dire que nous avons une certaine inquiétude, les co-rapporteurs, et le Président en a parlé, parce que la situation est une situation de blocage institutionnel actuellement au Monténégro, dans la mesure où il n'y a plus de majorité pour le gouvernement, que le Président de la République refuse de nommer un nouveau Premier ministre, que le Parlement veut imposer la nomination d'un nouveau gouvernement et a voté une loi pour s'en donner les moyens. On n'est pas sûr de la constitutionnalité de cette loi. La Cour constitutionnelle n'est plus fonctionnelle, car plusieurs juges sont partis en retraite et le Parlement n'a pas été en mesure d'élire de nouveaux juges parce que cela requiert une majorité absolue et il ne trouve pas de majorité. Lorsque nous avons fait un voyage sur place l'été dernier et dans les discussions que nous avions eues avec la délégation et les autorités monténégrines par le passé, on nous annonçait régulièrement de l'optimisme quant à la conclusion de cette procédure et la possibilité d'élire de nouveaux juges. Et à chaque fois, on est déçu par le fait que le Parlement n'y arrive pas. Il n'y a pas la majorité qualifiée, avec chaque fois des explications qu'il faut changer ou reprendre tel ou tel élément de la procédure. Et c'est particulièrement inquiétant parce que la Cour constitutionnelle n'a aujourd'hui plus de quorum, ne peut donc plus prendre de décision. Or, elle est l'instance suprême de recours en matière aussi électorale et les élections doivent se tenir, les élections présidentielles. La date a été fixée maintenant à la mi-mars, elles auront lieu. Et probablement qu'une des possibilités politiquement, si les autorités se mettent d'accord à ce sujet, c'est aussi qu'à un moment donné, il y a des élections législatives anticipées. Et pour cela aussi, il faudra une Cour constitutionnelle fonctionnelle. Donc on a un système en échec, on dirait une situation de patte, une situation de blocage complet où chaque institution bloque l'autre dans la résolution de la situation. Un avis a été demandé par le Président de la République à la Commission de Venise sur la constitutionnalité de la loi sur les pouvoirs présidentiels qui a été votée récemment, fin décembre, par le Parlement. Et c'est intéressant parce que la Commission de Venise, à mon avis très justement, insiste, avant de parler de cette question, insiste beaucoup sur la nécessité de la coopération loyale entre les organes de l'État. Et c'est vraiment ce à quoi nous aimerions appeler les autorités du Monténégro, véritablement que les institutions, le Parlement, le Président de la République coopèrent pour trouver une solution à ce blocage, pour en sortir, de manière à éviter une situation de crispation accrue qui ne serait pas dans l'intérêt du pays, qui ne serait pas dans l'intérêt des engagements qu'il a pris ici devant cette Assemblée et dans l'ensemble de son intégration à l'espace européen. Donc nous appelons de manière assez ferme et assez forte les autorités du Monténégro à entrer dans ce sens d'un dialogue constructif entre les autorités pour trouver des solutions politiques.
Thank you, Mr. Cotier. Then we continue with Mr. José María Sánchez García from Spain and European Conservatives. The floor is yours.
Gracias, señora Presidente. Me voy a referir a los casos de Polonia y Hungría, ambos estados bajo monitorización o control de la Asamblea. El informe es claramente más detallado respecto a Polonia y se insiste en el caso de Polonia en que ha habido dos pronunciamientos de la Corte Constitucional polaca que han declarado que es incompatible la Constitución polaca con el artículo 6 de la Convención Europea de Derechos Humanos, tal y como viene siendo interpretado por la Corte. Este informe insiste además en que Polonia debe cumplir las sentencias de la Corte Europea. Todo ello suscita un problema muy relevante desde el punto de vista jurídico, a saber, el problema de la superioridad o supremacía del derecho del Consejo de Europa, léase la Convención de Derechos Humanos, además de sus sentencias, la posible supremacía respecto a la Constitución polaca. Es decir, un debate mutatis mutandis semejante al que se está produciendo en la Unión Europea respecto de la primacía del derecho a la Unión Europea sobre las normas constitucionales de los Estados miembros. Para resolver este problema, el Consejo de Europa, no esta Asamblea, el Consejo de Europa no tiene ningún instrumento legal. Entre otras cosas, porque el Consejo de Europa no fue fundado para que ninguno de sus órganos determinase la legitimidad o ilegitimidad de las normas constitucionales nacionales, sino que fue fundado, y en particular la Convención Europea de Derechos Humanos, para que la Corte pudiera reparar violaciones singulares de derechos reconocidos en la Convención Europea de Derechos Humanos. No, insisto, la validez o legitimidad de normas constitucionales generales, por lo tanto, de los Estados miembros del Consejo de Europa. Por lo tanto, es un poco de fantasía jurídica que aquí se pretenda poner en cuestión este pronunciamiento de la Corte Constitucional polaca. Por otra parte, se insiste también en que la composición no es una composición que se caracterice por la independencia. Bueno, y entonces, ¿qué podemos decir de un órgano constitucional de control como es el Consejo Constitucional francés, que es un órgano político por su propia naturaleza? Tampoco es independiente, aquí nadie lo pone en cuestión. Por no hablar de estados que siguen el modelo de Kelsen, como es el caso de España, en que el Tribunal progresivamente, el Tribunal Constitucional cada vez es más dependiente político. No voy a mencionar a los últimos avatares que ha sufrido ese Tribunal Constitucional español en el último mes para conseguir por el Gobierno español que sea totalmente dependiente. Por último, independencia del Consejo del Consejo del Poder Judicial también de Polonia. Bien, pero vamos a ver, ¿y el Consejo General del Poder Judicial español o el italiano de la magistratura? Son todos dependientes de los partidos políticos. Se eligen mediante el sistema de lotización. Por lo tanto, ¿cuál es aquí la rareza o el escándalo? Concluyo. Hungría. Yo pensé que habíamos decidido todos ser demócratas. Ahora, si a Hungría se le tiene que monitorizar porque sigue unas políticas en materia de educación, de libertad religiosa y de libertad ideológica disconformes con el mainstream y el establishment, pues entonces parece que la democracia ya no gusta. Es evidente que en Hungría se siguen políticas que defienden una concepción tradicional de la vida que no es aceptada por muchos partidos políticos europeos y, por lo tanto, por muchos partidos políticos europeos que actúan contra la libertad. Nada más.
Thank you, sir. I ask you to respect the speaking time because you're taking time from your colleagues. The next speaker is Mr. Ahmed Yildiz from Turkey.
Of course, I have a very concrete experience on monitoring process as chairperson of the Turkish delegation. First of all, I thank the rapporteurs and chair of the committee, but I have some suggestions here. I defend Turkey in the Turkish monitoring process, of course, but I am not a member of the monitoring committee, just because I am not registered in a political group. So I don't have any idea how others doing, how to compare Turkish process with other countries monitored. So I think it is unfair, and I will question it in my report on the Rules Committee to improve, in my report about how to improve the participation in the activities of the Assembly. Secondly, of course, a smooth monitoring process requires some prerequisite from both sides, from the monitored country, from the Assembly members, especially from monitors, but also from the authorities in the Committee of Ministers, especially when the pending issues continue in the courts, in the European Court of Human Rights. Also about their relationship with some organizations. And it requires some minimum consistency in the Committee of Ministers. The worst sickness here is the discrimination. Discrimination even among the verdicts of the European Court of Human Rights. Since I started here in this position, I always ask this question to Secretary General of the Council, President of the Assembly, and others. Why is this discrimination? Why don't we talk about some verdicts that have not been implemented for 10 years, 15 years? Just pick some of them as selectively. Everybody says, you are right. All must be implemented. But everybody just mentions one. So it creates some bad conclusion in the public. We should leave this. At the end, I thank the rapporteurs again, but this is my last speech in the Assembly. In the part session, I should touch one issue that I attend the meetings of ECRI, European Committee Against Racism and Intolerance, and I try to incorporate it in the works of the political committee. To my knowledge, the burning of Holy Quran under the control of the authorities, police force of one country, is a very Islamophobic hate action to be condemned here. It is not freedom of speech. I waited till now, somebody will touch it. They didn't, and I had to do it. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Yildiz. The next speaker is Mr. John Howell from United Kingdom and European Conservatives.
Thank you very much. I would like to thank Piero Fassino for this report. I would say that, wouldn't I? I'm one of his rapporteurs, so I have a self-interest in doing that, but I think his report is a good report. But you know, whether it is Mr. Fassino or the previous chairs of this committee, there is one thing that I have never been invited to, and I think it is because it has never occurred. And that is a discussion on what being a rapporteur is all about. I think it's absolutely important that we have that sort of discussion because, because how you approach being a rapporteur is very important to getting the job done. And I'm a very deliverables-orientated person, so I would like to understand that better. Countries are very different. So what I'm not requiring is a standard template that applies to all rapporteurs, and they just have to follow that template. And in particular, while we're on this subject, let me pay tribute to the Secretariat, who provide tremendous help to all us rapporteurs when we go to the countries concerned. But to go back to the countries and them being very different. One of the crucial things about being a rapporteur, I have found, is that it is much better to negotiate and to have dialogue than to stand up and scream and shout at the country that you are observing. It is much better to approach this with the sort of quiet diplomacy that can get things done and can get an answer to the questions that you are trying to find out. And I do think that that is crucial for everyone to take on board. As I pay tribute to Mr. Yildiz, who has run the Turkish delegation very effectively and helped us as rapporteurs in Turkey throughout the process. But we are sensitive there that Turkey is coming up to political elections, and we are sensitive to those political elections. One of the things that we need to address is when we are separate totally from the Committee of Ministers and when we can work with them. There are occasions when being a rapporteur means that we overlap with what the Committee of Ministers is doing, and we must have an ability to have conversations with them to be able to take forward the determination that we all show in fulfilling our roles.
Thank you, Mr. Howard. And this debate's last speaker is Mr. Armen Gevorgyan from Armenia and European Conservatives. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. The government of Azerbaijan, as well as its representatives in this assembly, want us to forget about the Nagorno-Karabakh conflict. They don't want you to use the name of this unrecognized state. They don't want you to speak about the human toll of its aggression during the 44-day war in 2020. Moreover, Azerbaijan has since May 2021 occupied sovereign territories of Armenia, launched a new three-day intensive hostilities last September in the southern Armenia, and since then have refused to withdraw from our lands and even built fortifications. Today we are witnessing a grave humanitarian crisis in Nagorno-Karabakh. Azerbaijani government has imposed a 46-day and counting siege on Nagorno-Karabakh, depriving its people of their right to live in dignity, freedom of movement, import of food supplies, medicine, and other essential goods. This is not just a human rights issue, but a manifestation of a state policy of ethnic cleansing by Azerbaijan. I believe Europe must stay focused on Nagorno-Karabakh. In that context, it's quite strange that the decision to dispatch a PACE monitoring mission for fact-finding purposes in the region is not being implemented. What is this? Indifference or expression of dysfunctionality of our organization? The democracy index by The Economist defines Azerbaijan as an authoritarian state. It has been ruled by the same family for more than 40 years, and over the past 30 years has started free war against the Armenians of Nagorno-Karabakh, killing thousands of people, destroying the cultural and religious heritage of the Armenian people. Today, it terrorizes the Armenians through the siege of Lachin corridor. Given the authoritarian and terrorist nature of Azerbaijan, is it possible to imagine Nagorno-Karabakh as part of it? Azerbaijan has for years manipulated the public opinion in our organization, something they are now unable to do in European Parliament, in United Nations Security Council, or OSCE. We have to reflect on why this is the case. I also want to invite this Assembly attention to the fact that Azerbaijan, since late 2022, has begun a process of abolishing the self-governing status of Nakhichevan Autonomous Republic. This is a clear violation of the European Charter of Local Self-Governance that has to be prevented. Madam Chairman, it is also time for this Assembly to very seriously consider non-recognition of credentials of those delegations whose governments are engaged in transboundary use of force or other serious and systematic violations of human rights, be that in their own territory or abroad. Thank you.
Thank you so much. That concludes the list of speakers. The speeches of members on the speakers list, they are not here, so there's no more to be tabled, I think. And I would like to call Mr. Fassino. You are both chair of the committee and also rapporteurs to reply to the debate, and you have, of course, then 3 minutes.
Grazie Presidente, merci Monsieur le Président. Je veux remercier avant tout tous les collègues qui sont intervenus et qui ont exprimé appréciation pour l'activité de la Commission et appréciation pour toute l'activité de nos rapporteurs et de nos secrétariats. Je partage beaucoup de choses qui ont été dites, donc je ne reprends pas ça. Je veux seulement dire quelque chose. Premier point. Je suis absolument d'accord avec le collègue Ozoï. Nous sommes aujourd'hui dans une phase dans laquelle les démocraties sont mises à risque et mises en cause de tendances autocratiques. Il y a en plusieurs pays européens, et pas seulement européens, la tendance à contrôler les médias, l'indépendance de la magistrature, les droits de la minorité, des minorités, et je pense donc qu'il faut absolument refuser cette tendance autocratique et nous battre pour affirmer les principes démocratiques, parce que ça, c'est la façon essentielle pour défendre la liberté et les droits des citoyens. Deuxième point, la Commission de Venise, c'est un instrument essentiel. Et nous, on travaille presque chaque jour avec la Commission de Venise. Et je souligne la nécessité que les pays qui sont soumis à monitorage accomplissent aux indications et aux avis que la Commission de Venise nous propose. Troisième point, le collègue Bona. Il n'y a aucune référence dans le rapport sur l'Hongrie aux problèmes de relations entre l'Hongrie et l'Union européenne. Et nous, on ne substitue pas l'activité et les fonctions de l'Union européenne. Mais les questions que nous avons posées dans la procédure de monitorage de l'Hongrie concernent le respect des principes, des valeurs et des critères qui sont établis à la base du Conseil de l'Europe. Et chaque pays qui est membre du Conseil de l'Europe, et l'Hongrie, il est membre de notre Conseil, il est obligé à respecter et accomplir les critères, les valeurs et les principes qui règlent la vie de notre Assemblée. Pour cette raison, je dis à M. Sanchez qu'il a souligné qu'il y a dans plusieurs pays la tendance de la politique à envahir l'activité de la magistrature ou contrôler les médias, qu'accomplir aux critères, aux valeurs, aux avis de notre Assemblée et du Conseil de l'Europe, c'est la façon pour respecter l'autonomie et l'indépendance de cette institution, et pas le contraire. Et enfin, je veux dire à M. Sanchez encore qu'il n'est pas en cause les droits de la Pologne, de l'Hongrie, de chaque pays de se donner les lois qu'il veut. Mais il ne peut pas prétendre de se donner les lois qu'il veut et dans le même temps d'être membre d'un Conseil d'Europe si ces lois ils sont en contradiction avec les critères, les valeurs et les règles du Conseil de l'Europe. Ça, c'est la question. Il faut seulement choisir. La Pologne, elle doit choisir si elle veut être membre de notre Assemblée, et alors, il est membre de notre Conseil et notre Assemblée, il doit respecter les règles qui nous concernent. Il veut faire des autres choix, libre de les faire. Mais alors, il ne peut pas prétendre d'être membre du Conseil de l'Europe. Il faut être clair sur cette question. Enfin, je partage entièrement ce qu'a dit M. Howell. Je pense que l'activité de monitorage, ce n'est pas une activité de justice. Nous ne sommes pas un tribunal. Nous exerçons l'activité de monitorage pour vérifier les standards démocratiques dans les pays de notre institution et pour favoriser que les pays accomplissent à tous les valeurs, les droits et les critères de notre institution. Et nous, on veut accompagner ces pays. Et donc, les recommandations que nous approuvons, les avis de la Commission de Venise, sont des instruments qui doivent encourager les pays membres à se donner des lois, des règles, des attitudes qui soient cohérentes avec les standards démocratiques de notre Assemblée. Et je partage, comme il a dit M. Howell, et je vais terminer, que nos rapporteurs...
It's 5 minutes,
tout de suite, un mot. Que nos rapporteurs doivent être avant tout des hommes et des femmes de dialogue pour avoir une attitude positive avec les pays qui sont soumis à un monitorage et ensemble travailler pour des finalités qui sont communes. Merci, Madame la Présidente.
Thank you, Mr. Fassino. The debate is closed. The Committee on Monitoring has presented a draft resolution on document 15682, to which 2 amendments and 1 sub-amendment have been tabled. Amendments will be taken in the order in which they appear in the compendium, and I remind you that speeches on amendments are limited to 30 seconds. I understand that the chairpersons of the Committee on Monitoring wishes to propose to the Assembly that Amendment 1 and 2 to the draft resolution, which were unanimously approved by the Committee, should be declared as agreed by the Assembly. However, 2 will be taken separately as it has a sub-amendment. Therefore, Amendment 1 to the draft resolution, which was unanimously approved by the committee, should be declared as agreed to the Assembly. Is it so, Chairperson? Yes, it's so. Does anyone object?
Oui.
Yeah, oui. Does anyone object? No? I see none. There is no objection. I declare that Amendment 1 to the draft resolution have been agreed. And I call Mr. Armen Rustamanian to support Amendment 2. You have 30 seconds. Yes, and another one want to, he's not in the plenary. 333, you have the floor. I do not see, introduce yourself. 30 seconds.
Thank you, Madam Chair. This amendment has also passed unanimously after being sub-amendment by the rapporteur. It reflects the interim measure by the court on the Lachin corridor. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Rubinian. I call Mr. Fassino on behalf of the Monitoring Committee to support the sub-amendment. You have 30 seconds. Another one want to support? Mr. Sado, to support? You are against the amendment. You are against. Then, yeah. But I call Mr. Fassino on behalf of the Monitoring Committee to support
Oui,
the amendment.
oui, mon sous-amendement oral signifie de biffer les mots the unblocking of. Et donc, après cette correction, le texte sera implemented the institution of 21 December 2022 regarding the Lachin corridor.
Thank you. And then I also have to call anyone else to speak against the sub-amendment. I think it was Mr. Sado. Yes?
Madam President, actually, this is a little bit, I think, misunderstanding. Mr. Rubinian, actually Mr. Rustamian, presented this amendment. And of course, I was against, because this amendment absolutely changed the decision and the interim decision of the European Court of Human Rights, because they are writing about the so-called unblocking, but in the decision you can see alleged, the word alleged. That's why I was against. In this case, my president of the committee, Mr. Fassino, said that he's going to present sub-amendment. And he already said about that. Sub-amendments is acceptable. And that's why I am against completely amendments which presented by Mr. Rustamian, and I'm in favor of sub-amendment which presented by President of the Monitoring Committee.
We understand your message, but I have to ask, what is Mr. Rubinian's opinion on the sub-amendment?
No, but I'm for.
You are in favor of the sub-amendment, yes?
Yes?
And the committee is obviously in favor. I shall now put the sub-amendment to the vote, and the vote is open. And the vote is closed. I call for the result to be displayed. And the sub-amendment is agreed to. Now we come to the main amendment 2 as amended. Does anyone wish to speak against the amendment? No, I see none. The committee is obviously in favor. Yes, it is. I shall now put the amendment as amended to the vote, and the vote is open. And the vote is closed. I call for the result to be displayed. And Amendment 2, as amended, is agreed to. We will now proceed to vote on the draft resolution contained in document 15682, and the vote is open. And the vote is closed. I call for the result to be displayed, and the draft resolution in document 15682 is adopted. A few minutes continues with the next item.